quick report on the whereabouts of Representative Howe. He was with his son today in Salina, who was having surgery, I believe, on his ankle. He says the surgery went well, and he is currently in the recovery room, and Representative Howe is waiting with him there, so he's not going to be on WebEx either. But we have prayers for Representative Howe's son as he recovers from his surgery. Today's loan order of business is a presentation on the Kansas State University Dairy and the Kansas Dairy Association. The Kansas State University Dairy, they're wanting to refurbish it and modernize it, but it is not in the governor's budget. So, Brianna, can you explain that for us?
Thank you, Chair. So the presentation we hear today, currently there is no number in the budget for whatever they are requesting. So this would be an external request outside of what the governor has recommended.
And do we have any idea what this number might be?
I do not have any information on that number.
All right, that's fine. That's not necessarily a fair question, but just thought I'd ask. All right, so let's begin with our conferees, and I'd like to welcome to the podium Janet Bailey. She's the CEO of the Kansas Dairy Commission. Welcome, Janet.
Vice Chair Sanders, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I do wish to keep my comments fairly brief because I'm the CEO and you have real dairy farmers with you today. And I don't know how many times before today you have had dairy farmers come before the Higher Ed Budget Committee. And they are the experts in this industry. We also have Dr. Mike Brook, an extension dairy specialist who has celebrated more than a quarter century of serving our dairy farmers in the state. He has a close relationship with many of our dairy farmers, and more importantly, he is the expert on the needs of the modernization of the Kansas State University Dairy. With me today, additionally, is Maggie Gillis from Sedgwick County, Melissa Hildebrand Reed from Geary County, and Kyler Oldie from Washington County. They are all dairy farmers in the state of Kansas. They are what I would call, the core leaders of my organizations among the two boards that I work for, and experts on not only what this industry needs, but the driving force and the energy, and three of the dairy farmers to whom I am accountable. So it's nice to have some of my bosses in the room today. I do want to share with you a little bit of background of our organizations. The Kansas Dairy Association has been in existence for 30 years, and the Kansas Legislature established in 1995 the Kansas Dairy Commission. The commission is what we call a producer self-help voluntary checkoff. And as the Kansas dairy industry has evolved and changed, one thing has remained the same, and that checkoff principle to help producers in their needs and focus on the needs of the Kansas dairy farmer has remained consistent. I joined the organization as their CEO about a year and a half ago. And, as we would joke, hopefully I know where the pencils are, or the fact that there aren't any pencils and we are in a high-tech industry in the dairy world in Kansas. We are really the global epicenter of growth of the Kansas dairy industry. We export milk. We are subject to global demand, global markets, and the producers in the room today can certainly speak to how they are adapting and managing risk on their operations. I would draw your attention to the color handout that you have in front of you. This is a product of research that was funded by the Kansas Legislature to show the future needs of the Kansas State University Dairy Science Program. This was funded 2 years ago, completed last year, and reported last year to the Kansas Legislature. Updated numbers as of this year, this month, would show that our dairy industry produces over $1 billion worth of farm value of milk. That's the milk at the value that it leaves the farm. The direct economic impact of the dairy industry in the state of Kansas is $6.5 billion. And we have 9,457 jobs attributed directly to the dairy industry. We have $2.2 billion worth of direct economic impact in the state of Kansas, $454 million of value to feed use, and our tax contributions of the dairy industry to the state of Kansas are $232 million. So to your question of what would this dairy cost, the good news is it is less than the $232 million my industry is paying in taxes every year, which I consider that to be a positive. And to be very candid, it is a number that Dr. Brook will be able to address if you would like to call him. That is an appropriate question for Kansas State University in terms of the cost of the facility. Additionally, when the study was conducted, Aimpoint, the firm that was contracted to do the study, saw that there was very strong support for a robust dairy program at Kansas State University. They saw that it was imperative that we position the industry to have the next generation feed, forage, and nutrition research. Quote, K-State needs a modern working dairy with primary focus on the animal to address the sustainable intersection of animal health, water use, feed use, local inputs, milk content, and emissions. The dairy farmers of Kansas have supported and value the program at Kansas State University, not only from a research and teaching side, but certainly from extension as well. We have seen the research at Kansas State University not only be taken to the citizens of Kansas, but heat abatement research and other critical research for cow comfort been adopted not only across the U.S., but even globally renowned. Reproduction research from one of our professors has for decades been published in an industry-leading publication and is known to be of the top quality. As the public funding of industry research has diminished, we recognize it's even more important sometimes for our farmers to be fundraisers. More than a decade ago, our dairy farmers began to set aside dollars to rebuild this university dairy. However, we recognize that our checkoff is not sufficient to fund this amount. So we need the state of Kansas to make that investment for the fastest growing segment of Kansas agriculture. But our Dairy Commission made the first step. A decade ago, they pledged $100,000 and over time increased that to $500,000 that they are ready to invest. Please keep in mind for a checkoff that gets 3/4 cent per hundredweight, a voluntary checkoff, that is a multiple year income for our dairy farmers in their small checkoff. Respectfully, we would ask you to consider this request to find a way that we can support this in this year's legislature. And most importantly, then, I would like to give you the experts that we've brought into the room, our dairy farmers, so that you can hear from them. I would certainly be happy to stand for questions. And again, I would welcome you to utilize the resources in our room with our dairy farmers to ask any questions as well.
Thank you, Janet. Do any committee members have any questions? Representative Wassinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I didn't see, I must not have been listening closely enough. Did you give an amount that you were asking for?
I indicated that is an appropriate question for Kansas State University because they are working with the architect. So Dr. Brook is here today, and when he presents, I think that's an appropriate amount for him to share.
Okay.
Mhm.
I thought, how did I miss this?
So, Dr. Brook,
thank you.
Not to preempt your testimony, but could you just answer that specific question? What is the amount of the request? Could you please step up to the microphone? Thank you.
Thank you. So, what we have been through in the past year or so, we have been working with architects to come up with that number. This is a projected number based on current construction costs, but also projected in the future as we realize that we're not starting this today. It's going to be sometime in the future when this would be built. So, an average number for the construction of the project that is proposed would be $40 million.
Thank you. And we'll be hearing from Dr. Brook later. Janet, I have a question. So, how did this request not get into the governor's budget?
That's a great question. One we could probably filibuster. So I'll try to shrink the answer. There is a reality. My dairy farmers have been working on this for a decade, as I mentioned. The progression of this was, one, the needs analysis was done. We demonstrated a need through that study. The architectural study was not done in time for this request to be made. So there was no good number. And really, essentially, there has not been a good number until the architects were comfortable and Kansas State University agreed upon what the facility plan should be. And that was too late for the governor's budget. So no harm, no foul. That's where we are in terms of timing. But the time is now because the reality is you cannot weld on the welds much longer, and the dairy facility is in extremely poor shape.
Thank you. Yes, Chuck Smith, Representative Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, could I ask you, I thought we passed something out last year that goes along with this. Did we not pass something out?
I was not a member of this committee last year. I do not know. Does anybody know? Brianna?
Mr. Chair, I can make reference. I think I worked with Representative Rogers. If I'm not misconstrued. We had an amount appropriated to the dairy research at K-State, but I don't think it was necessarily for the association. But we did have an appropriation of, I think, about $800,000, if I'm not mistaken. But I can get a number for that.
Thank you.
Representative Rogers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 years ago, we had money allocated for a study. And then when the study was, or not, I'm sorry. We had money allocated, the balance that was left over paid for the aim point study. That was what we did last year. Also, we did K-State 105 in this committee, the economic development arm. Now, there was not specific money for this. So that may be what that was. There was $40,000, is that right? I think to what we had left over allocated, that we allocated to aim point for the study.
I can speak to an allocation to the Department of Agriculture. They retained aim point to do the study. The Department of Agriculture had money left, and so there was direction given to the Department of Agriculture such that Kansas State University could retain the architects to do the plan that would then give us the amount, so we would know what this dollar amount is that we needed for the new dairy.
Yes, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And I know we've got more, and I know we're going to focus a lot on the dollar amount, so we'll do that here in just a little bit. In light of what has gone on recently, within the last, 2 weeks, South Dakota State came out and said they are disbanding their dairy. That is a competitor to Kansas. That is a possibility. I guess my question is, and again, the K-State people here, but from the industry standpoint, what could that mean? Does this mean, now is even a brighter, that the iron could be even hotter now to make that investment?
Yes, we do believe as an industry, it is more critical to make this investment for multiple reasons. One, milk is not marketed with respect to state boundaries. I would never pretend to be the expert on milk marketing. You know, in school, we used to joke about 6 people understood milk marketing and 3 of them were dead. Milk marketing is the most convoluted thing on the planet, but understand there's a significant amount of pooling and pricing that goes on with milk. So when we look at the Great Plains region and we look at where dairy farms are, we recognize that it is an advantage to have your researchers where you have the cows. And I think Ole Johnson, even in his comments, Ole couldn't be here, but he spoke to having your researchers in the same state is a great advantage. And Ole has dairied in 3 states. He dairies in near Sharon Springs and Tribune in western Kansas. So that is definitely an advantage for those who continue to be in the industry. 2, from an education perspective, it's not only our animal science students, it's not only those who choose a dairy science education. Kansas State University has a veterinary medicine college. And for some of those majors, the very first experience they get with large animal medicine is the work that they do at the K-State Dairy. They may be hired as students, they may take classes, but 450 to 500 students annually get exposure through that Kansas State University dairy. So it's much more than training our next generation dairy farmers. While that is important, it's also our veterinarians, it's the folks who are handling foreign animal disease management for us, mastitis research. It's absolutely critical that we know this is moving forward.
Yes,
Okay.
Representative Branges.
Thank you again, and I do have another, I'll try not to take too many questions and, because we'll go to others. So let's talk about the funding from industry, from association checkoff and so on. So the total amount right now is 40 million to build the new facility. Is that right? Okay. From the ground up. Okay. And we'll talk about K-State's commitment to leaving it where it is. And that's a whole, but I want to talk about that later. So that 40 million, how much is industry committed to or has to provide as we look at kind of doing the math?
Sure. You know, as I mentioned, our checkoff has agreed to contribute $500,000. When you do the math, you might think, wow, we'd sure like to see more, which I think we would all like to see that. But I would encourage you to step back and understand dairy farmers pay the freight both way. They pay to form their milk marketing cooperatives if they are marketing through a cooperative system, which the majority of Kansas dairy farmers are. They pay the hauling to get their milk to market. Right now, the majority of our dairy farmers are marketing their milk at a loss. They are marketing at below their cost of production. They pay into the checkoff to promote and develop new products, not my checkoff, a different checkoff. So while it would be lovely to say my dairy farmers would write checks, they have. That's why they created this checkoff in 1995. And they recognized that our dairy at K-State was in such a state that they wanted to start setting aside a corpus to address that. Until we have a commitment that the new dairy will be built, there is no possible way to go to other industry partners and say, would you fund it? Because we have to have the commitment that it's moving forward. Furthermore, again, if my dairy farmers are paying upwards of $300,000 or $300 million in taxes, and we're looking at what K-State says is $40 million, I don't know of any greater return for education and economic development dollars than to carve those dollars and invest in this dairy.
Committee, are there further questions? Yes, Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when you look at the overall governor's budget, we're looking at over a 13% increase in spending, and I don't know what it's going to be for higher education, but last year we had an issue that initially we went way over the governor's budget request, and then Chairman Wade-Master, chairman of the Appropriations Committee, came back to us and said, you need to fix this and take some of the funding out. And so it seems clear to me that the Appropriations Committee doesn't want us to go way over the governor's budget, especially when her budget is so high to begin with. And so my question would be, do you have any suggestions for us to take $40 million out of the for a budget out of her budget request in order to make room for your request?
Certainly a question that I would anticipate. The reality is, I wish 10 years ago that my dairy farmers were screaming loud enough when we have issues that they need addressed. And the reality is there's no good answer. But I can tell you the dairy farmer who called me at the end of last year wondering if they should move to Kansas, if they look at our facility at Kansas State University, and we continue to have dairies wanting to locate in Kansas, if they look at that current facility, that will answer their question. And when we invest in other industries and we don't invest in the state's fastest growing segment of agriculture at the land grant, that's a very tough thing to answer. And that's something that at some point our dairy farmers say, the state's not investing in us anymore. So it's a difficult conundrum. I appreciate that. We've had that conundrum for a decade. Are we to invest in our own land grant, or do we need to start looking elsewhere as well? It's tough.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. You were talking about 300 million in taxes. Is it on this sheet?
It is, yes. It is. So I apologize, 232 million. I had that confused with another number. So yes, 232 million. It would be the second bullet point down on the right. 232 million. Previous year, it was 185 million, so it continues to increase. Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
Committee, further questions? All right, thank you, Janet. Appreciate you being here today. Next up, a farmer from Southeast Kansas, Linda Foster. Linda's not here today. All right, then that means that a farmer from Sedgwick County, Maggie Gillis, is our next presenter. Maggie, welcome to committee.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Sanders, and the entire House Higher Education Budget Committee. My comments, I think, are in a packet you have, but I'd like to extend on them a little more. Like he said, my name is Maggie Gillis. I'm a mother, I'm a dairy farmer, and I'm an alumnus of Kansas State University, so I'll be real honest and frank about that. My family and I dairy just outside of Wichita, Kansas. I returned to the farm full-time 4 years ago, but from 2014 to 2020, I worked in the state of Wisconsin for a national dairy magazine by the name of Hoard's Dairyman. I mention that because some of what I'm going to tell you about today relies on my experiences as an editor, where I worked full-time to distill research that was being done at a university like K-State into practical, applicable information that could be used on dairy farms across the country. In that role, I worked very closely with researchers at several universities across the country. And I actually stepped foot on 8 different research universities, which I think of the people in the room today outside of Dr. Burke, might be the most dairy set foot on by any of us. So based on that experience and some of the data that we collected at Hoard's Dairyman on a yearly basis, I can tell you that there are 26 universities across the country that offer a dairy option or dairy major and also have a dairy farm as part of their university. Obviously, as you may guess, Kansas State University is one of those colleges that offers that. It's important, I think, from my comments today to gather that good research and dairy training almost always require a link between good dairy faculty and good facilities. Universities that lack one or the other don't have the resources to meet the needs of students, and in our case, farmer-requested research. I'd like to tell you a couple stories of 2 different of those university dairies I mentioned before that I visited while employed at Hoard's Dairyman. The first I visited in 2017. The University of Kentucky Dairy Farm was formerly in Lexington, and I was there on a trip for the Precision Dairy Farming Conference. That conference focuses exclusively on technologies of the future and how they apply to dairy farming. I found it ironic as I stepped onto their dairy for the first time because the farm was mostly built in the 1950s and 60s. And it featured one of the most outdated dairy barns I had been in at that point, and I had been in hundreds. The faculty there explained to me at the time that they couldn't update it without legislative approval, and they felt that that was not something they'd be able to attain. It was such a striking juxtaposition for me because at that time, the University of Kentucky was one of the leading dairy research facilities for precision dairy. Each of their cows wore at least some form of tracking device, and most wore 2 or 3. So their research specialized specifically in wearable technologies, your Apple Watch or Fitbit. And they tracked cattle movements, cattle health, location of the animal. This type of research is hugely influential in helping farms like mine control disease, improve animal welfare, and find more efficiencies. So in monitoring these things, they're able to tell us more about the individual cow. We're able to eliminate some of the people that work on our farm for the fact of more efficiency of knowing those things, but we're also able to hire people that have more experience in cattle in order to then be able to not just be looking for cattle, but being able to solve problems. And yet the leading university researchers in this area were working in a dairy barn that was very, very similar to the one that my grandfather worked in when he started my 3rd generation dairy farm. A farm that we've obviously improved since that time. As you can imagine, this wasn't sustainable. Within a few years, the leading dairy faculty member at that university had left, and Kentucky had shuttered its dairy completely. The university and the legislature made their priorities clear. The dairy was not important to was not an important industry to their state. However, while Kentucky's industry continues to shrink, Kansas's, as Janet mentioned, is expanding. Let me give you some numbers to that tune. According to USDA data, and this is in 2022, the state of Kentucky produced 926 million pounds of milk. Kansas is at 4.1 billion and growing. If you look at your projections on the blue sheet, the Aimpoint study found that it's predicted to be around 7 billion. That 7 billion number would put Kansas in the top 10 for milk production quite handily, for some context. Let me offer you that other example. This is from the state of Virginia. In 2016, Virginia Tech built a state-of-the-art 12,000 square foot milking barn, 46,000 square foot cow housing facility that would hold a little more than 200 milking cows. I had the opportunity to step foot in those barns in 2019, and I saw kind of a research person's best wishes. They had milk monitoring systems, individualized feeding boxes, a modern waste management facility, and calf and heifer growing barns that were thoughtfully built to do the type of research that the state's dairy industry needs to flourish. I want to read to you how Virginia Tech describes this dairy farm. They say on the website that this facility bolsters the long-term success of Virginia Tech's award-winning dairy science program and contributes to the university's land grant mission. Students examine modern issues in dairy science alongside researchers who are working on solving challenges and sharing those solutions with Virginia Cooperative Extension. I bring this up because Virginia Tech and Kansas State have some similarities. Virginia Tech has an undergraduate enrollment near 30,000, which is obviously bigger than K-State, but only about 700 agricultural students. They have an active dairy judging team, an active dairy challenge team, and their teaching unit interacts with students. They have school faculty dedicated to dairy research and education and all the tools and resources they need to attract top-notch dairy researchers. Let's look at Kansas State. An undergraduate enrollment around 16,000, but more than 2,000 of those are agricultural students. The university has an active dairy judging team, a competitive dairy challenge team, and we utilize the dairy classes for training of students. I obviously was one of those students that benefited from the hands-on experiences at the dairy farm to shape my career and provide information that I use daily on the farm. I would much rather see K-State echo the efforts of Virginia Tech than go the way of the University of Kentucky. As you well know, and as we've already discussed, research facilities like this one are expensive, but they're paramount to student education and development. They play an important role in giving young people hands-on experience working in the field before they graduate. I know this because outside of my own experiences, I've employed 2 Kansas State University students, or at least 2 that I'll give example to you today. One of the individuals was one of those kids that came from Andover, Kansas and had no dairy experience. She was a vet tech student and she began working on the K-State dairy. By the time I hired her as a graduate, I was able to entrust critical cattle care decisions to her. Another story and another student that we currently employ is a student at K-State. He came from a dairy background and has a desire to manage a dairy operation, but his farm made the difficult decision to stop milking cows almost 10 years ago now. His ability to gain knowledge on all facets of the dairy from talented faculty and hands-on experience at the dairy has set him up well to pursue his chosen career. This is the point I'd really like you to hear. Good faculty produce good, employable students, and K-State has been blessed with many over the years. However, faculty like the ones we have are in high demand today, and they require adequate research facilities to fill the need of their work. In many areas of dairy research, there are regional differences. For example, dairy barns in Wisconsin look much different than those on my farm. Similarly, farmers in that state rarely worry about temperatures over 100 degrees, while we see them obviously multiple times a year. I mention this because it's not just research on heat abatement that matters, but even research on reproductivity or nutrition is affected by something like the weather. And the regionality of these differences means research institutions specific to those areas are very important. So typically when we look at regions, kind of how they break out across the United States, K-State falls in the region of the High Plains. North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. Right down the center of the country from Canada to Mexico. Let me tell you what that means for our Kansas State dairy program. K-State is one of 5 universities in that region with an active dairy research facility. The other 4 are North Dakota State, Oklahoma State University, Tarleton State University, and the aforementioned South Dakota State University. So in June, that number will drop to 4. Let me give you this number in a different way. Excluding research facilities in California, between the Mississippi River and California, there are 5 universities that offer that offer the same thing K-State does: a dairy option and a university dairy farm. There is a competitive advantage not only for my farm, but also for the university to be a leading dairy institution that brings together the best we have to offer in research and in faculty. As an alumnus and a dairy farmer, I hope that K-State remains a leader in this region for dairy research and training. But I do not think this will be possible unless we choose to invest in the future of our dairy program and do it now. I want my son to be able to pursue a career in dairy if that's the path he chooses. And I want that opportunity to be at a leading dairy institution in this region. I'd like it to be at K-State. Thank you, Vice Chairman, and for the entire committee for taking time for my comments. I welcome and appreciate any dialogue you might have on this issue, and hope you join me in supporting the modernization of the Kansas State University Dairy Research Facility.
Thank you, Maggie. Committee, are there any questions for this conferee? Yes, Representative Smith.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Young lady, thank you. Very good. Your experience is tremendous. Of all the places you've been, who has the best advice?
I appreciate that question. And there is a difference, right, in research facilities versus researchers, but more and more you find this combination of the two. What they're doing at Virginia Tech is industry leading. they do a lot of nutritional research. And when you're doing nutritional research with cows, you need to know how much each individual cow eats. You can only do that on a university research facility because I am not going to measure how much my cow is eating on a daily basis. I never make money, right? And so they have some of the best facilities for doing that. I'll mention a few more. Iowa State has a pretty strong dairy. They rebuilt that dairy while I was in college. So I think 2011 or 2012, they put in a new facility. The facilities in some of the bigger dairy regions, New York and California, can vary between being really nice and more like ours. I think you'll see a lot of changes in university dairies over the course of the next several years because universities will either say this is important or they will say it's not.
Representative, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Vice Chair. I understand a little bit. A comment was made earlier that you actually lose money on milk. How do you stay afloat?
You can't lose money every year, right? And so much of what we do as dairy farmers is finding those efficiencies that allow us to continually make money for virtually what is the same that my dad did when he first started milking with fewer inputs while the cost of those inputs go up. For me, it's all about efficiencies. How can I do more with less? How can I find opportunities to lower costs, do things myself? Or how can I outsource those things to other vendors and industry around me that can support that? So do I lose money every year? No, gosh, I hope not. But sometimes we do.
I hear that with wheat farmers and other farmers. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maggie, thank you for all the great information. Question, and somebody can probably answer this, but I'll ask you. South Dakota State University, is their program going away totally?
No, they're going to continue having their programs. So a little bit of a backstory on that. They had some fires and some things happen at the dairy a few years back, and so a lot of what they were looking for was they had to fix it in order to do that. Now, they have a very booming dairy science program. It's one of the better ones in the country. And they combine that with a really good dairy foods program. It's much like K-State. We're very competitive among the two, if you take my opinion for it. But what they're going to do is their dairy researchers are going to be forced to do a lot of their research on operations within the state, other like active dairy farms. So there's going to be certain types of research they will no longer be able to do for that reason.
Again, Representative Amix.
Mr. Chair, so do we know what happens to those kids that are in those programs that are not going to be given the opportunity for that research study?
Yeah, I don't have as much experience with graduate level studies as I do with undergraduate. I only have the bachelor's degree. However, that's a really competitive space. There are a lot of students that want to study reproduction, primarily reproduction and nutrition in the dairy industry, and they often flow to other universities. It's as simple as that. They will go somewhere else to find the kind of work they want to do. South Dakota State does a lot of nutritional studies and work. The nutritionist that I employ on my farm got his graduate degree from South Dakota State. I haven't been in contact with any of the professors there. I don't know what kind of plan they have for doing those studies. But I have that same question for them because there's a lot of types of research that they're going to have a harder time doing now.
So those kids are going to have to go somewhere, and this facility that we're talking about here is going to be the state of the art and allow that to happen, correct?
That would be my hope.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thanks again for being here. Okay. Trying to tackle this too much, Mr. Vice Chair. I would say you're probably the current and future of Kansas dairy. Talk about your operation, those ones in Southwest Kansas, and tie that into how we can make a facility work for the industry in Manhattan. And I have a follow-up based on probably even your answer.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Representative. A couple of things. First, about my farm. My family and I milk 150 Holstein cows. We have about 300 head of young stock, and we sit just a few miles off of the Arkansas River, just outside of Wichita. You're absolutely right. My farm looks very different than the farms in Western Kansas. My dad always used to say, get weird or get big. And it's our intention to get a little weird. So we live in a place where we hope to do some direct marketing to consumers into the city of Wichita. We don't want to grow. We want to stay a little bit smaller. And we are eyeing robotic technologies during my lifetime for obvious reasons. Those efficiencies I spoke of earlier. So let's talk about perhaps other dairy farmers, Ole Johnson or even Kyler Oldie. They're a little bit bigger. They have different facilities. They have different types of cows. But you know what? They do the same thing. They make milk. And it's very important when you start talking about research that I mentioned the differences in research based on climate. Guess what? They farm in pretty similar climates. And in fact, when you want to talk about the heat and humidity in Manhattan, it's worse than the humidity in Western Kansas anyways, right? So when you talk about doing these studies, some studies apply broadly across all types of farms. If my cow eats more of this kind of feed and therefore she eats 3 pounds less feed per day, his cow's going to do the same thing. That research applies to all of us. Now, if we talk about wearable technologies or we talk about trackers or stuff like that, it's a very similar story. His cows are going to wear the same ones I do. He's going to buy a whole bunch more of them, but they're going to wear the same technologies, and we're going to be gathering the same information. I think the only difference is, honestly, the type of facility we're going to milk cows in. They may both be robotic, but his might have a robotic arm, and mine might be in a box. But the data that those two systems would collect would be very, very similar. So practically, what we're doing is very different, but the research that we're using to make our cows more efficient, water efficient, feed efficient, productive, are quite similar.
Yes, go ahead.
And I'm gonna go someplace probably I shouldn't, and I'll probably get this Bailey will come after me. A lot of the big dairies, a lot of the cattle numbers are west of Manhattan. We have an extension facility at Hayes that needs attention. Do a lot of cattle feeding there. There's a lot of. I'm trying to piece this all together, and I know, and I guess I'm wanting from an alumni and from a young dairy person. Is there and can there be a role, or what do you see as an alumnus for, say, a Hayes, a collaborative work with Fort Hayes, realizing that, that may not be a possibility, but we're trying to stretch dollars as well.
I appreciate
and so, and with everything going on north of the stadium, I'm a little nervous. I guess twofold, Mr. Vice Chair. One, that's a big investment. On the other hand, how many more years? This is editorial. How many more years can we wait before the Edge District says, you know what, we can build, 5-story buildings to put people in.
Sure.
We won't have room for a dairy. Now that I know that's pretty out there, but I think it needs to be said. So that's a very long rambling question, but I guess have you looked kind of, as you say, getting weird or thinking differently? Because I'm sure the industry has looked to you as a young leader. Are there other ways to look at this, how this can work?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. I'd love to address it. I can't say I've been on the campus of Fort Hays State University or their facilities. I know people that have, though, and kind of the shape that those were in. I think it comes back to some of what I said in here. I believe very firmly that it takes two things to have a successful research farm like the one we're talking about at the K-State Dairy. It takes good faculty, it takes good facilities, and let me add a third, it takes students. And I think that what we have developed at K-State and what is there as far as dairy student programming is so much further ahead than some of the agricultural programs that are offered at Fort Hays State. And so I talk about not reinventing the wheel, about having good facilities and good faculty there already, ready to do the work, that know what's going on and what the system and then having a wealth of students to pull from. That can be these kids like the young lady that I got that was a vet tech student and she became a dairy kid. It's math for me. There's more opportunities, more students at Kansas State University.
Right, and I guess I'm looking at the Research Extension Center through Kansas State.
Oh, sure.
Fort Hays is there. Fort Hays is not a research institution.
Yep. Okay.
It's different. So I was looking at the extension farm,
Thank
which is off campus, off from the K State farm.
Yes, I appreciate that clarification.
Fort Hays farm, and just and again.
Now, is there an opportunity for a heifer facility or something like that? Sure.
And that's what I'm wondering, especially, and we've talked over the last couple of years is with some of the research that's being done even in Southwest Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I understand to keep everything in Manhattan, but just like you said, it is the humidity in Riley County is much different than humidity in Stanton County.
Yeah.
And so does that limit? Will the question
limit our research facility?
Will the research that could be done at this facility be of value to our big commercial dairy farms in Southwest Kansas? Those where people seem to be moving. I don't hear a lot of 150 cow. No offense. Those are great things, but the 1,000.
Great point. Yes, I think so, and I think so for this reason, because regionality matters, but we are regional to that space, and that our extension is close and available. And when I look at research studies, and I have read far more of them than I had ever hoped to when I was employed at Hordes, that you don't look at something done in Wisconsin and apply it to Kansas because you have a temperature and a humidity difference. Actually, the humidity is sort of similar. You want to look to places where they have both a temperature higher than you or a humidity higher than you or both. Because you can use that data. No, you may not be exactly the same, but you know that where those cows were in at that research, that situation was, if you will, worse than what your cow will be experiencing. Does that make sense from a kind of a research mind? And maybe Dr. Brook, as an actual researcher, would have a better feel for how that works. That's how I would interpret it as a farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And I don't want to belabor the fact, but I think it's important that we hear from kind of the ones that are working in it, and Mr. Older too. I want to hear from later. So
okay, we need to move this along. Thank you, Maggie, for being here. My understanding is Ole Johnson is not here. Okay, so what I'd like to do is have a farmer from Goddard County, Dave Lane, and then a Strickler Holstein farm, Steve Strickler. Are they both here? So, okay, so they're not here. Okay, so then Dr. Mike Brook is a research and extension dairy specialist at Kansas State University. So Dr. Brook, welcome to committee, and I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. As I get started here, I wanted to, I guess, clarify my presence in this room today. So yes, I am a professor and extension dairy specialist at Kansas State University. As part of my job as an extension dairy specialist is to assist the dairy industry. So my purpose here today is to assist dairy farmers that you've heard from already, and farmers that you will hear from after I'm finished, and their effort to rebuild the dairy unit at Kansas State University. So greatly appreciate the support of the industry for this project. It's something that I've been involved with the whole time because I work with their Kansas Dairy Association as well as the Kansas Dairy Commission. So I do appreciate everyone taking time to listen to the request today. I'll be brief in my comments because I believe that there's probably a lot of questions that you folks would like to ask. So there is a letter that's being passed out at the present time. There is one typo in it at the bottom of the first page. In the very corner, it should be over $1 billion, $1 billion, not $1 million in raw milk sales annually. So as I look at some of the comments that have been made, a couple of things I want to emphasize is that our facility was built in 1977. It has been well used. We've milked it for all it's worth. And you know, when you mix steel and manure, you get rust. And regardless of what you coat that metal with, those coatings eventually wear off, and you have rust and you have decay. The same thing happens with concrete. So we have a physical facility that has been well used, but it is in sad need of replacement. KBOR came in and requested a study on and to give it a condition index. And the facilities we're talking about replacing received Fs and Ds. So very, very definitely by other professionals looking at it, it is time to do something different. We do need modern facilities to teach from. It's like teaching in a classroom from the mid-1970s. Some of you were sitting in classrooms in the mid-1970s, so you might think about the technology that you had. Chalkboard, white chalk, maybe colored chalk, you know, maybe there was an overhead projector, maybe with the acetate sheet that you could roll. All right, so that's what we're faced with as we try to train students. And yes, we've done some updates on technology and as we've moved along, but it really is necessary to get into something that is important and functional for training students with what the industry standard is today. So the new facility that is proposed, and we've got a few of these handouts, and if you're interested, please grab one of those. Actually represents two different types of milking. So one is a 30-stall rotary parlor that would have prep robots and post-dip robots on them. So it would have robot technology there, but that represents what our large dairies utilize for milking. They use large rotary decks, much larger than this one, but they're still rotary decks. Another part of the project would include two robotic boxes. And those are the boxes that milk cows automatically. People don't have to bring animals to them. The animals come on their own. They work 24/7. And those two boxes would handle about 140 animals together. So as you look at the facility, that's a facility that smaller producers would utilize. And I think one of the key things that has made Kansas State University successful over the years is that we have tried to do our very best to conduct research and teach producers regardless of size. And I'll give you just one example. The technology that we use to cool cows on most of our farms in the state of Kansas, across the U.S. and around the world today, was actually developed at Kansas State University. And it required the use of our tie stall barn at the Kansas State University research farm so that we could collect some very intense information off of cows as we cooled them with different methods. Once we figured out which methods worked the best, we took that outside of Manhattan. One of the first farms where that technology was installed was actually in western Kansas. And we went out there with the crew, put up feed line soaking systems and monitored that in a research study. We also went to some of our smaller farms, and they were a little closer to Manhattan, and we conducted intense studies there. And it's from those studies, the combination of what we were able to do on the K-State dairy to determine what is the best method, and then taking those methods outside was very, very successful. And we took that to the industry, and the industry ran with it, and that resulted in that technology actually spreading all across the world today. So when if you walk on a dairy farm and they've got a soaking system above the feed line to cool the cows in the summer, that idea actually started at K-State. And that's just one example of how we need a research facility right there on campus that can support very intense studies, and then giving us the ability to take that preliminary data, if you will, out to producers to convince them that these are things that they ought to try. And that's a combination of what we do on the research side as well as the extension side. And that is what really has made us very successful in the areas of heat stress and nutrition and reproduction. Those have been kind of the key things that we have worked the hardest on. As we move forward in trying to train students, I think there's a huge need for a regional facility here in that center section of the U.S. that Maggie described. Unfortunately, we're losing a critical part of a very good program at South Dakota State University. I received my PhD there and served on the faculty. Very sad day for the Jackrabbits. And because I know what's going to happen. It's going to be hard for that institution to attract faculty members on the production side. It's going to be hard for them to deliver like they've been able to deliver, because they're not going to have a farm to take students to. One of the hallmarks of Kansas State University is that our livestock facilities are located very close to campus. If we have a 2-hour lab, we can actually take students out there. That's the reason why we have so many students visit the dairy. It is close enough that we can get students out during their class times, and we do. Okay. I appreciate the worry about, is the city going to grow? Please understand that we have made significant investment in animal facilities right next to the dairy. So there's about a $4 million intake facility that's right there. There's significant investments in the swine research facilities there. They have upgraded over the years and invested millions of dollars there. The beef industry in the state of Kansas is currently working on a proposal to replace the beef feed yard that's right there. And that'll be a $10 to $15 million project. So what I can tell you is that Kansas State is very, very dedicated to having research facilities that are close to campus. And we're far enough away. We've got some fields and other buffer zones that I think we're in a good place. And there's significant investment there already, and will continue to be there. Just to the south of us, the vet school has their large animal research center. And again, millions of dollars have been invested in that facility in the last 7-8 years. So I think we're in a good spot as far as being able to produce good research, train students, and work together with our industry. So with that, I think I will stop. I know we got probably some time limits here, but would entertain any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Brook. I'll take the first couple of questions. One, a very basic question. So when I was preparing for the meeting today, I was noticing that milk production is measured in pounds. Why isn't it measured in gallons?
Well, very good question. That probably comes from the fact that we sell milk. We're paid for milk on a 100-weight basis, or 100 pounds of milk. So
How many
with
gallons is 100 pounds?
so we'd be about milk is about 8.6 pounds per gallon, so a little over 9 gallon.
Well, okay. All right. Then my next question is, so I came here today thinking that what you wanted to do was refurbish the existing dairy farm. But now what I think I'm understanding is you want to completely demolish what you have and build from new from the ground up. Is that correct?
Yes, and let me add this to that. So it is a working facility. We have ongoing research projects. We have ongoing training we need to do for classes in that current facility. So if we would go in and try to refurbish, that would make it very difficult to do those sorts of activities. Again, it's been looked at by other experts other than us, and it's been deemed that it's not repairable or rebuildable. That the real need is to construct a new facility. So the
is
proposal is
demolition in that, is the demolition number included in that 40 million?
the demolition would not be included because some of those facilities will be repurposed for young stock raising and those sorts of things. So all the 40 million does is it allows us to build a facility for the heifers and calves. So we have the building site for the new dairy is where the heifers and calves are now located, and those animals range in age from just a few days to upwards to about 6-7 months of age. So we would move those animals off that site into a new facility that would facilitate their cow comfort, as well as facilitate our ability to do research with those animals that we don't have right now. And then the new dairy facility for the lactating cows, dry cows, would be built in that spot. So it's kind of a two-stage process.
My final question for now. So what's the time frame on this? If you were to have started January 1 of this year, when would it be finished?
So again, it's in two phases. The heifer facility and calf facility would need to be built first. None of this is fully designed yet, so we got a design phase to go through that we've not been through. My guess is it would take about 6 months to get that heifer facility design, bids, and those sorts of things. Could be 9 months. Then the construction of that would probably be, depending on weather delays and those things, probably about a 6-month process. Once that's done, we could move into that and then start on the dairy facility itself. The design work for that dairy facility could be ongoing during the construction of the heifer buildings. So as soon as the heifers are moved, we could start on construction of the dairy. I would anticipate that construction of that project would probably be about a year in length. So let's say there's funding that's made available on at the end of June of 2024. We're looking at some construction starting in 2025, and then probably the completion of the lactation facility and the dry cow facility would probably be 2026.
Thank you. Other questions? Representative Rogers.
Thank you. And you're gonna come back tomorrow. Are you gonna be here with us tomorrow? Okay. I'll be careful not to ask too many, but just kind of for all of us, as we kind of look through the dollars, could you explain of the milk that happens on campus from those cows? It is sold. Does that money get invested back in your program? Where does it go? Does it get credited back to you? Is that a cash flow? I'm just trying to find if there's ways to do some creative financing.
Okay. The The practice at Kansas State is that the milk income does come back to the Animal Sciences Department, and it is allocated to the dairy. So we do have to cash flow. Basically, what we are provided, we're provided one position, one full-time position. We're provided at the current time, we're provided utilities, electricity and water, although that likely will be changing, and we may actually need to cover those costs as well. But everything else, most of the labor, all of the feed, any of the repairs on the dairy, we had to replace a bulk tank about a year ago. That's $100,000. We had to cover that out of our operating. So we do have to cash flow. The money does come back to the dairy from the milk sales.
Okay. So just like every other Kansas dairy,
Pretty much.
you do have a little safety net there. Hillmar cheese.
Yes.
So with that here, and it's seemingly, 2 years ago now, we as a state won that bid. I'm assuming that they were in contact with you and as far as the K-State Dairy and the dairy program uh, have they asked for any sort of collaboration, or have you worked with them on what, if any, impact that could have on the dairy industry moving forward? I mean, I'm trying to think of, other partners in a sense that, because he's coming next week to the Capitol.
Right. So Gilmore is a processing plant, and as an extension dairy specialist, I'm on the production side. I'm on the cow side. I do a little bit of crossover, but not a lot. So there have been some discussions at this point on trading programs for workers. Nothing has been formalized yet. That's kind of above my pay scale. However, along with the plant, we've also got an expansion of dairy farms in the state. So one of our retired professors, Dr. Joe Harner, out of the Ag Engineering Department, has been working with some of those facilities, and I'm involved with some discussions with those facilities as well. But they're just, one of them is under construction, and the other two are just basically getting started. So there'll be more conversations, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if this has already been mentioned or not. Maybe it was, but has there been an attempt to obtain any funding for this new facility from private donors?
At this point, no, there is not. We have not done that. So this request is coming from the dairy industry in the state of Kansas. So they're the ones that are driving the request rather than Kansas State University.
Committee, are there other questions? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony, Dr. Brook.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that needs to come before the committee this afternoon? Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, we have another dairy producer that, if I would like to ask him a question or an explanation of what he does on his operation. It's a multi-generation family up around Palmer.
Okay, he's not on the list, but that's fine.
Okay.
But we're going to have to keep it really, really short. So please tell us who you are and where you farm.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm Kyler Oldie from Lynn, Kansas, right next door to Palmer. My family and I operate Oldie Family Farms, and we have 3 dairy farms. We milk about 4,100 cows.
Mr.
Go ahead.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I was able to go at their grand opening in one of their new facilities and utilizing robotics. And so I want to kind of, if you could explain how, when you made that transition, what that means and what this, if we would do this for Kansas State moving forward, how would that help you and your, because again, multi-family generation, they do a lot of things for outreach to tell folks about not only agriculture, but dairy and some of the things you do.
Yeah, that's actually where Mr. Representative Rogers and I met at our open house. He was willingly came to our open house at this robot facility. So, and I did not mention I'm the third generation on our dairy farm. My grandfather started in 1955 with three milking cows. So, but K-State, the research facility, we do have robots, and you could say it's probably like a lot of industries. Technology is in the future. It's here already. So we need to embrace it. And, a state-of-the-art facility for K-State would give the opportunity to have that research happen right here, on our back door, which would be wonderful. As aforementioned as well, I mean, for the most part, any substantial growth that's going to happen in the United States is going to be right around Kansas, through these Great Plains areas. And so I think, once again, that opportunity is there for K-State. I was just thinking back as well while Dr. Brook was speaking. He mentioned the soaker system that you'll see on dairies all across the world. Like he mentioned, there's a picture of my dad on a magazine from 1997, and it says flushing sand with success, and that was also from I think Joe Honor had a lot to do with that here at K-State. We're only located 60 miles from Kansas State, from Manhattan. So we've had the opportunity to work with these wonderful guys a lot. And Dr. Jeff Stevenson did reproductive work that, once again, had been used across many dairies. So back to the robot question. It's one thing to say this is what it'll be, but the other thing is, if we have the facility and the researchers and the faculty to do the work, the sky's the limit. So to say what that opportunity is, I think that what the future holds is very bright. But just the reality is that robots, AI, whatever it might be, is the future. And I think the big thing is we'd love to have that happen right here, and to patronize our state as much as we can.
Would it be safe to say that your grandfather wouldn't recognize what goes on today?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate you coming up.
Thank you.
All right, committee, anything else? Yes, Brianna.
I just wanted to clarify, because I know Representative Smith had asked about appropriation. So last year there was an appropriation of $252,800 to KSU for dairy research. So that was for fiscal year 2024.
Anybody else? All right, we'll see you tomorrow afternoon at 1:30. The meeting is adjourned.